Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Friday morning, 6 o'clock here in Calgary, Alberta, and this is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. I'm so happy to be here, and always happy to be here to be able to do these shows. You know, back when I first started doing these shows, I did the first ones back in November last fall, and I really had no idea how long I'd be doing this Blog Talk Radio show, and had no idea what it would evolve into. You know, I was just going to do like one show a week, and wasn't sure how long I'd even do that. And, you know, I thank everybody for the support and everybody who's tuning in and who's listening and here with me all the time. It's just awesome. And, yeah, I just appreciate people's support and friendship. It's just so great. So, yeah, I'm so happy to be able to do the show. And we're going to be on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I'm just having some coffee, waking up here. It's Friday morning. It's been a long week, but you know, I'm just so happy to continue on talking about what we're talking about. We're still continuing on with child sexual abuse. I wanted to look at an article that's from healthyplace.com, www.healthyplace.com, and it's what is child sexual abuse? Definition of child sexual abuse and signs that a child is a victim of sexual abuse. So it's a very short article, but I wanted to talk about it. There is a lot of adult content, like really sensitive material on it. So I would ask anybody who's very sensitive about the subject of abuse to please make sure that you're okay to listen to it. Listen at your own discretion. This particular article has quite a lot of, you know, it's information that some people might find very sensitive, especially if you've survived child sexual abuse. And also, you know, if you're a young person under the age of 18, I don't know where these players are placed now, the Blog Talk players, so you know, if you're a young person, you might want to, I would appreciate it if you would ask someone who's an adult if they think you should be listening to this show, right? There's a lot of adult content on here, even though this is ultimately about stopping child abuse and, you know, making a difference for children in this world today and for tomorrow and the next generation. There's a lot of adult content, and some of it's kind of scary. Abuse is not talked about in mainstream society very much, and even though we see it on TV, we see it in the papers, we see it everywhere, we see it in people's homes next door and in our own homes, but still nobody wants to talk about it, so it's not necessarily talked about in mainstream society. So you might not have heard a whole lot about abuse, and the topics and the subject could actually, you know, make you kind of uncomfortable, and could also make you kind of have a bunch of questions that you just don't know where to get the answers to. So that's why I think it's very important that young people have an adult to listen to the show with them, and then they can help them make the right decision whether they should be listening, and also then they can help you with questions if you have questions about what we're talking about, right? So important. And yeah, so we're gonna get right on with this article. You know, it's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do this show because I believe that we all have to start talking about child abuse of all kinds. We have to stop child abuse, and every single one of us is going to have to take a part and a role in that. Not just people who have been abused, and not just people with degrees and certificates in child rights and child care and whatnot. You know, child protection. We're going to have to get everyone involved. I mean, every single person. Because I mean, really, if you could take an honest count and say, okay, everyone who wants to stop child abuse, stand up. If you could just do that around the world, it would leave all the abusers sitting on the floor, and then we'd be able to pinpoint out all of these turkeys who are out here hurting their children and hurting their families. It's unfortunate that we can't get people standing up in their own families to make a change for children, and that's why children are dying at the hands of their parents and caregivers. And if they don't die, they're in the hospital due to you know, abuse-related injuries. And if that doesn't happen, it's just because nobody's reported it, and the child just suffers daily through a life of hell, and then has to deal with it later, which is what, you know, we're talking about here, which is child sexual abuse, you know, survivor issues, and also what is the definition of child sexual abuse. So we're going to get right into that this morning. And this article, you can pull it up, www.healthyplace.com. And it's written by a staff writer and last updated September 2009. So it's, you know, it's really not all that old. It's relative material. It's not all that old of an article, but it's a very short little article. But you can go through and read it for yourself too, and I think that's important. You know, that's why I always give the references so people can go back and actually read the article. And I'm just reading right from it. I usually just add my own stuff, so because I am a survivor of child sexual abuse, molestation by a family member, and so I know what it's like to be a child who's being abused sexually and not get any help, And so I had to deal with this on my own my whole life, and the shame around it, and just the whole. I actually kind of put it out of my mind for many years, even though I knew something was wrong with myself, because I didn't like to allow anyone really, like especially a man, to touch me, right? And so I had relationship problems. I had all kinds of problems when I was young and a young adult, and I had all kinds of wrong ideas in my head about relationships between people, because my parents had such a warped relationship. There was a lot of abuse and rape and whatnot involved there, because my mother would refuse to have sexual relationships with my father, and so he would just rape her, right? So that's rape. I hope people know that it doesn't matter whether you're married or not. Unwanted sexual advances and being forced upon another person is rape. So it doesn't matter who the person is. It's the act of rape, and it is a crime. It's unfortunate, because it's more than a crime. It kills the other person inside. You know what I mean? It spiritually kills them, and it can do a lot of physical damage as well. And I just think that and a lot of emotional damage and psychological damage. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And so, I had no healthy vision. I had no healthy way of looking at sexuality, and I had no healthy way of looking at my own body in a healthy manner as far as my own sexuality went. So that's what this kind of sexual abuse can do to people. It can really mess you up, and so that's why, as a survivor, we have to make sure that we get help and find help wherever we can, just to realize that, hey, it's not our fault. This is not something that we did to ourselves. It's something that was put on us by other people who were supposed to be, good role models and examples for us. And then, it's not our fault that we had those warped ideas and have those problems, right, emotionally and psychologically and even physically, right? So it's just not our fault. And so we don't deserve to suffer in silence. And I would just ask everybody who's having a hard time to make sure you reach out and get some help. There's great survivor groups out there, and there's people who have been through a lot of the same things, and they maybe not everything the same, right? But something similar, and so they know what it's like to be suffering through with that. They know how much pain is involved, and they know how hard it is to heal from that and walk the daily walk. And so that's why it's so important just to keep reaching out, because you will. It's my hope we'll eventually find the right help. Whether it's a therapist, a counselor, an online group support, online groups, or even support systems within your own community, like local groups who meet, get together and talk. And it's really it's really such an awesome thing to do, to finally find groups of people that are so proactive and really want the best for you. Before I met so many people here about 7 months ago, when I finally started reaching out, I had no idea. I put my hands out there, and pretty soon I had all these hands reaching out to me, and I tell you, the healing that has come from that is just it's amazing. And just in the last 7 months, so that just tells you, it can happen, but we have to make the first move. Really, I believe that people don't often know that people have been abused, and they might think that you have a little bit of behavioral problems. They might think, oh, I wonder what's wrong with that person. They just have some weird personality traits or something, because maybe you don't trust people, or you just certain behaviors they might think you're just sort of strange, but they wouldn't realize the abuse that we suffered. They wouldn't know. They wouldn't have a clue. It's not written all over our face. What might be written there is that we have emotional problems, or we have some sort of problem that's causing us to behave a certain way. But they wouldn't know about the abuse, right, unless we told them. So that's the whole issue. It's so good to find people that we can talk to, and actually who know about what goes on behind closed doors and what happens to children, and what happened to us. And we need that validation, and we need people to give us a hand, you know what I mean, with just being there for us, right? It's just being that support person. Quite often in our own lives, it's hard to find people who will stick it out and walk the whole way with you. I've had some really good friends over the years, but they just felt like they could not stick with me for the whole ride. You know what I mean? They loved me. I know they did, and I loved them very much too. But for some reason, quite possibly because they were not abused in the same manner that I was, and it just didn't go on for so many years, that they couldn't deal with me anymore, and they had to drop my friendship, right? And some I actually dropped, their friendship because I found that they were abusive, and I just thought, no, I'm not taking any more abuse, right? So it's so important as a survivor to get help and make sure that you do keep reaching out. So here, we're going to start this article now. Definition of child sexual abuse and signs that a child is a victim of sexual abuse. I'm reading right from the page here. And it says sexual abuse of children is a harsh fact of life in our society. It is more common than most people realize. Some surveys say at least 1 out of 5 adult women and 1 out of 10 adult men report having been sexually abused in childhood. Now, there's different statistics, right? Like, you can look around. I have done a lot of looking around, and the general consensus is 1 in 3 or 4 girls and 1 in 6 or 7 boys. Somewhere in there. It's a little more common than the 1 out of 5 and 1 out of 10. This might be because I'm not sure why they would, because this article was written in 2009, so it just must be some statistics that they saw out there, right? It's a good idea to get out and actually look at the most current statistics. As a matter of fact, I need to do that too, right? I have. There's websites you can go to get the most current statistics, and I haven't done that lately, so I should. But I know that it's still pretty much similar. Like 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 3 or 4 girls, 1 in 6 or 7 boys report having been sexually abused in childhood, and that's only because they reporting that they had been. You can imagine all the people that haven't said anything yet. You know what I mean? That's too many. Well, let's continue on with the article. Child sexual abuse is any sexual act with a child performed by an adult or an older child. It might be fondling, getting the child to fondle the other adult or the older child. It is really about all contact, sexual contact, regarding the child's body and the adult's body, and whether or not the child is doing anything back, and it's just the adult perpetrating this stuff. It is abuse, right? It's a sexual act with a child, and it's abuse. It's against the law. And it says other forms of abuse can also occur that are not as easy to detect, and these include showing an adult's body to a child, like showing his private parts, right, or her private parts, showing the child pornographic or dirty pictures or videotapes, right, or using the child as a model to make pornographic materials, because that's how child pornography gets distributed. People abuse children, and then they videotape it or tape it or whatever, and then send it off, right? And that's just, it's abuse, it's wrong, it's against the law. I hope everybody knows that. Boys and girls are abused in this way most often by adults or older children who are known to them and who can exert power over them. The victim knows the offender in 8 out of 10 reported cases, and the offender is often an authority figure whom the child trusts or loves, and the offender persuades, bribes, tricks, or coerces the child to engage in sex or sexual acts. And it says, you hope that your son or daughter would tell you or someone else about it. Yet children who are being abused often have been convinced or threatened by the abuser that they must not tell anyone about it, and a child's first statements about abuse may be vague and incomplete. They may just hint around about the problem, it says here. And some abused children may tell their friends about it, who may then tell an adult. And many children tell about abuse after a personal safety program is held at their school. Sometimes parents may have suspicions about abuse, and parents need to be aware of the following behavioral changes in their child. These may signal sexual abuse, right? And here they list off some of these. Noticeable fear of a person or certain places. Unusual or unexpected response from the child when asked if he or she was touched by someone, right? So yeah, like if they're all of a sudden afraid to go somewhere like the daycare or the babysitter's house. Let's say they used to love to go there, and every day they love to go there, and then all of a sudden, one day you notice they're freaking out and having a little bit of a panic attack, and there's a real problem there because they're like, they don't want to go, and they start getting upset and uncomfortable. You might kind of wonder what happened there, because they were having a good time before, and why are they now upset about it? So possibly, you never know what could have happened there, you know what I mean? But the whole issue is it should alert a parent, right, to sort of say, hey, something's changed here, right? Because kids just don't decide all of a sudden one day to behave in certain ways. If somebody makes them uncomfortable, they're going to be uncomfortable about going to that person's house, you know what I mean, or going to that daycare, you know what I mean. If they've seen something or if they've experienced something that makes them uncomfortable, of course they're going to be uncomfortable about going back there. So that's why it's so important to sort of recognize whether, to really pay attention to your child and know whether they're just having a bad day or whether there could be something seriously wrong there. And really, I think everybody should check up on the people that they leave their children with. Make sure that you do know who your child is with and do a background check, references. Never just leave your child with anybody, right? And you have to, because you can't anymore. I don't think you ever could, but especially now, because there's millions and millions and millions of child sexual predators out there. And these are people that will gain your trust as a parent. They'll buddy up on the relationship, and they'll be like, "Oh, watch your child, no problem. I'm glad to do it." And then you find out later that, for the last 2 years they've been molesting your child or sexually abusing them. You really, really have to be a little bit more of a detective than that. And you need to stop in and sort of, if your child stays with someone during the day, you need to find, I'm sorry, I know how people live. I lived really just above the poverty line all the time. And, I know how it is for people. There's no money involved in like taking time off to go check on your child. I don't have any children, but I can imagine. I try to put myself in other people's shoes, and I can imagine, because I've always had a lot of really crappy jobs in my lifetime where, you can't just take time off to go and see if your child's being sexually abused or not, because the workplace just doesn't care. It's like, so what if your child's being sexually abused? We have work to do here. You know what I mean? And you're getting paid hourly, so you're not leaving. And, I just know that's how society is. People don't care. They're probably, responsible for abusing their children, and that's why they don't care. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, but 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys are being abused. So that tells you how many abusers there are. That would mean, there's at least 1 for every one of those. So if you know 3 adults and 3 adult women and 3 adult men, you can figure that some of them have abused a child sexually. And because somebody's out here doing the abusing, right? We often talk about the abused children, but the abusers are out there and they are doing this, and there's at least 1 or 2 per abused child. So if it's not 1 person, there'll be 2. That both parents, right, or both, 2 people in the family or whatever. So these, and then they're of course working with you all day, and you wouldn't even suspect that they're abusing their children or somebody else's child. It's a really sick plague upon society, and it needs to stop. And so, I don't know, as parents, if you suspect that something's going on, then you find a way to get over to check on your child and drop in on them unexpectedly just every now and then and make sure that they are not being abused. You know what I mean? So important, because this is happening. It's a real thing. It's not just pretend, right? It's not like, oh, it's just in the movies, or we just, it's somebody else's problem. Because I know I don't have any children, but let me tell you, if I did, I would be seriously paying attention to what's going on with my child and make sure that they don't suffer at the hands of another adult. You know what I mean? Like, that is just so wrong, so sad, and their innocence is stolen from them. They never get it back. It's not something they can just grow back. Like, once your mind has been changed, and once your heart and your emotions have been changed to feel things that you never should have felt as a child, it changes you, right? So, I was born into an abusive home, and I stayed in an abusive home forever. So, my mind, I don't probably think like somebody who hasn't gone through that. You know what I mean? Because I have that trauma, and just the long-term effects of trauma. So, it's very hard, and you never ever get that childhood back, and I wouldn't even know what it would be like to be a healthy child, right? Like, I wouldn't know what it would be like to be just a child who comes running in the room and gets a lot of love and attention and told nice things on a daily basis and told that they should go and have a good life and do things like go to college and join sports or join clubs or, just that whole support mechanism, right? So that's the whole issue. And then, there's so many kids out there who don't know that as children. They don't have any love in their lives. They don't have any care in their lives. And, these are people that work at our workplaces that are doing this to their children, and we don't even know it because it's not reported. And it just pisses me off. It makes me so angry because abusive parents quite often have so much support, and even child sexual predators have quite often so much support, because people don't want to believe that somebody could be treating their children that way or treating someone else's child that way. So it's so important to not just blindly trust everybody, and make sure that, if there's children in your lives, and you actually can you can see these children, that you are keeping an eye out for the signs and symptoms, right? It's just so important, because abusive people are very manipulative. They have to be to keep doing what they do, and so you have to make sure you're looking out for these kids, right? It's just so important. And the rest of this article here, there's still some more signs that that might signal sexual abuse, and these are unreasonable fear of a physical exam. Let's say you have to take your child to the doctor for a regular, a physical or whatever, or let's say they have a bad cold or something, and you need to take them in, and then all of a sudden they're freaking out because they don't want to go for a physical exam. But they used to be okay with it. Let's just say this, because this would be behavioral problems. Like, they used to be okay going, and now they're freaking out. Well, there might be something wrong there. Drawings that show sexual acts, abrupt changes in behavior such as bedwetting or losing control of the child's bowels, sudden awareness of their genitals and sexual acts and words, and things that they shouldn't know about, sexual acts and stuff. That's why you cannot let your kids watch pornography. Do not let your kids watch most TV. Most TV is pornography. And, adults, you want to make a decision to watch that, that's your choice. But children, there's certain things they shouldn't be seeing, and so it's very important to control what your child sees on the TV and online. There's so much adult sexuality and adult content online, and little kids should not be seeing that. They shouldn't have to know. They should be allowed to be children and explore their own awakening to sexuality when it's their own proper time. It shouldn't be forced on them. And so, because it's natural, eventually they will want to explore that, and when it's time and it's the proper time, that's all right. But small children shouldn't know about sexual acts. I'm sorry. So, you want to make sure that you are paying attention to what they're drawing and what they're doing. Because that's a sign that there may be someone abusing them and showing them these things and doing these things with them, and then all of a sudden it's part of their world. And if you're not paying attention, right, you wouldn't even know that your child's being abused, especially if there isn't any pain and they're not complaining of any pain, or you don't see any blood, or you don't see any bruises or anything like that, right? Because this can happen, sexual molestation is abuse, right? And so, it could be going on right under your eyes, and right under your nose, and you wouldn't even know it, right? Attempting to get other children to perform sexual acts, that's another issue. We're talking children, young children. Older, youth, sometimes I've read in our articles here that they do that sort of thing. It's part of just exploring their own sexuality, really. And that's why parents have to pay attention to it, you know what I mean? But the thing is we're talking small children here. And small children don't, unless they've witnessed it or been through it, don't know how to perform sexual acts, not on other people. You know what I mean? They sometimes will explore their own bodies, and that's quite normal. I think that's very normal. But they will not know how to do all these different sexual acts and putting on a show type thing. So you can imagine, if you see your really young toddler or child doing these things, you will know, hey, they've either seen something or they've been involved in something that they shouldn't have. And you want to be paying attention to that. Physical signs of child sexual abuse may include sexually transmitted diseases such as gonorrhea. During an exam, a pediatrician may also notice changes in the anal or genital areas. And if your child does reveal sexual abuse to you, the most important point is to take what your child says seriously. Many children who report sexual abuse are not believed. When a child's plea for help is ignored, he may not risk telling again. As a result, the child could remain a victim of abuse for months or years. So listen to your child's explanation for disclosing the abuse. Make sure you report the abuse and help your child to understand that the abuse is not his or her fault. And give lots of love, comfort, and reassurance. It says if you are angry, make sure you let your child know that you're not angry with them. Let your child know how brave he was or she was to tell you that you understand how frightened and scared that they are. And this is most important if the child has been abused by a close relative or family friend. And then tell someone, which is generally 90% of the case, right? Then tell someone yourself and get help. Talk to your child's pediatrician, a counselor, a police officer, a child protective services worker, or a teacher. You got to get help for that child. If you see a child being abused or a child discloses that they're being abused, you can't just blow it off. You know what I mean? Because children don't generally lie. They did a study on that. They did find, that I don't know how many out of so many, I don't know, millions of cases or something. There was a couple of cases that went through that were pretty much the only reason I happened to see it was because it was sort of front page news that this child had made up a whole bunch of stuff, and they actually proved it. But the thing is so then people say, oh, well, that's right, children just lie about everything. I could hear the comments being made over the years, right, about that particular case. This is a long time ago, but I've always been paying attention because I grew up in an abusive home, and I've always paid attention to this kind of stuff, right? And I thought, well, how do they know that she lied? You know what I mean? But they actually did prove it that she had lied, because I think she ended up fessing up, and there was just no proof. You know what I mean? They could not prove it, and they wanted to prove it. You know what I mean? They wanted so badly to prove what she had said, and they couldn't do it. So, and then she said no, she had made it up. I think she was mad at the other person or something. And the thing is that that's so rare. It's not even funny. If a child comes to you and says they're being sexually molested or abused in any way, you have to take it serious, because it is not a joke. It is probably happening, and you want to do something about it, right? It's so important. So don't just blow it off and think, oh, they're just lying, or because you know what I mean. Especially if it's a family member, a lot of people have a hard time believing that a family member would do something like that to their child. But 90% of abuse happens between, is actually put upon children by a family member or a relative or a friend of the family, right? So that's the whole issue, right? 90% of the children know they're abusers in 90% of the cases, right? They know and trust them. This is somebody who has access to your child, right? It's not some sort of 10% is strangers and people the child gets, the child meets somewhere during the day when you're not with them or whatever, like, child sexual predator or whatever, kidnapping situations and things like that. But that's only 10%. Then the other 90%, the child knows, and so does the family. And so this is what I mean. It's so incredibly wrong. And, people would think, well, how could somebody do that to somebody? You know what I mean? There's no way that person would ever do that to my child. And so they just blow it off, and they don't get that child any help, and because they just think the kid's making it up. And that's, to me, if you enable abuse and you allow a child to be abused, just because you won't get help, you're the only person that can get help for them, and then you choose to believe what you want to believe and don't get that child any help, you're just as guilty, because you're enabling the abuse. And actually, it's against the law to enable abuse. If you know about it, if you know what's going on, and you allow it, you're just as guilty as the person who's doing the actual abusing. So, we can't just let this kind of stuff happen. We really have to be diligent and make the phone calls and contact the police, fill out these reports. And if it's Uncle Joe or Aunt Jane or so-and-so neighbor down the street or grandpa, if they have to do time, they have to do time. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who it is and how much fun you have with them at the barbecues and how much you're going to miss them, being around, because they're going to be doing time. It's a crime, and it's not right. And so if they are abusing children, they need to do the time. I'm sorry, but it's a crime. And if people are harboring people and they know that someone is abusing them, they should be held accountable just along with that other person for the abuse, because it is so wrong. We cannot condone it, and so it's so important to get help for children. They cannot stand up for themselves, and as adults, we owe it to those children to get them help. So we've got about a minute left. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I am so happy to be. Let me tell you, it's a volunteer position, but I love it. I hope you will check out our website, http://dreamcatchersforAbusedChildren.com. I also hope that you will join us on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for an hour. Different hosts, there's different hosts on there. Regional directors, Elizabeth Brawley, Tammy Tanko, Donna Shear, the president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children and best-selling author Donna Shear, myself, and, guests, anybody who wants to come on the show, please let us know. We are so happy to have people come on. If you want to be a guest, we can schedule you in. We can have a great show, and I just hope people will get something out of it. We're trying to bring education, awareness, and prevention out to people, and I hope that people will definitely get something out of these shows. I know that I do, and we just appreciate the support, and we just thank you so much. And me, myself, I thank you all so much for tuning into my shows, because, I've had over 4,000 shows listened to. I have no idea how many people are listening, but you know what? I love you all so much, and I thank you for being here for me, because it means everything to me. And so make sure you take care of yourselves. I'll be back on tonight. Child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us, and that's at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm sorry, not Eastern Standard Time, Mountain Standard Time. And so everybody just make sure you have a good day. Take care and keep reaching out. Keep that hope alive, okay? Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.